In team policy debate, the affirmative team has to prove two things. First of all, they have to prove that there's a harm in the current system. Second of all, they have to prove that there will be an advantage. They will actually improve upon that harm. And it is the negative stance that the affirmative team cannot prove neither. And that is why we ask you to stand with the negative team. Before we get too far into the debate round, I want to clarify the goal of the negative team that we believe should be the standard in today's debate round. And that goal is that of national security. National security. And I have one main reason to prefer. The reason to prefer is because the duty of the government, our highest duty as a government, is to protect our citizens. Any standards such as justice that the affirmative team brought up is all going towards the central goal of national security. And that is why that should be the valued goal in today's debate. My partner will discuss a little bit in his next speech about how national security will be threatened. I'm going to be talking about it a little bit today in my speech as well. Today I want to go over one main significance point. And that significance point is that of a necessary balance. A necessary balance. Now both teams can agree that some terrorists are tried in military commissions, and some terrorists are tried in Article 3 courts. It is the negative team's contention that this balance is necessary. That it is necessary that some terrorists are tried in military commissions, and it is necessary that some terrorists are tried in Article 3 courts. I have three main subpoints under this. The first one is that federal courts are not an absolute strategy. Federal courts are not an absolute strategy. The reasoning under this is that because some federal judges and some federal courts are not equipped to take on these types of cases. The American Bar Association, the National Strategy Forum, and the McCormick Foundation joined together on a study that concluded many of the ad hoc procedures developed by the courts to manage terrorism trials have been effective. There is, however, a steep learning curve for judges and courthouses when it comes to trying terrorist suspects. In addition, and as pointed out in more detail to follow, several discussants were concerned with the cases never pursued in Article 3 courts and the potential problems that will arise if those types of cases are pursued in regular Article 3 courts in the future. Now, as the negative team is contending, and as this evidence is saying, we do agree that some cases need to be tried in Article 3 courts, and they are being tried in Article 3 courts. But it's not an absolute strategy, as I said before. It's not an absolute strategy because some cases are simply not fit for the federal courts. First, I want to talk about the second, I want to talk about the critical dilemma. The critical dilemma. Now, the fact is that in military courts, when you're trying a terrorist, there is often going to be sensitive information that is discussed in that court case. Now, the question is, what are you going to do with that sensitive information? That is a critical dilemma that the United States government has realized, and that's why they don't try some terrorists in Article 3 courts. The dilemma is, do you use the evidence, the sensitive information, that could jeopardize national security? Or do you not lose the evidence and risk not being able to convict that terrorist? Alan M. Dershowitz writes, imagine if the masked man who recently beheaded 2 American journalists were captured, and a value ISIS undercover source, who couldn't testify without blowing his cover, identified him as the killer. What would we do? What should we do? This is a critical dilemma in this situation. What do you do in this situation? The fact is that this is the type of court case that the military commissions were specifically designed to do, because they are not public and they do have certain precautions that are in place so that we are still able to convict a terrorist while not giving up sensitive information that could jeopardize national security. My second subpoint under the point of necessary balance is that these terrorists are still being held. The terrorists are still being held. Now, the fact is that the terrorists at Guantanamo Bay, they may not be receiving a conviction under the military convictions, but they are still being held at Guantanamo Bay. Now, anytime we release a detainee from Guantanamo Bay, he goes over intensified vetting procedures. Now, currently, I believe we have about 40 detainees in Guantanamo Bay, and all of them have been confirmed. They haven't been convicted, but they have been confirmed as high-level terrorists. The fact is that they will stay in Guantanamo Bay the rest of their life. So their life. So the advantage that the affirmative team brought up of them not receiving death row and them not receiving life in prison cannot stand, because these terrorists are still going to be kept in Guantanamo Bay for the rest of their life. They still will be receiving the justice that they deserve. Lastly, the point under this is that the affirmative evidence doesn't apply. The affirmative evidence doesn't apply. Under their subpoint A, under the justification of justice, they talked about efficiency, and they brought up an example of how military commissions were able to try many terrorists. However, this was completely, this isn't actually showing what the affirmative team is trying to show you that it shows. Robert Farley says, there are probably less than a dozen cases against people in the Islamic jihadist framework who have been convicted in federal court of serious terrorism-related crimes comparable to many of the Guantanamo detainees. See, the fact is that many of these terrorists that the affirmative team is claiming that have been tried in Article 3 courts are actually domestic terrorists, or some other form of terrorist that doesn't fit under the classification of military commission. So the fact is that military commissions could never even be, they're not even meant to try these terrorists. So the fact is, this once again shows that Article 3 courts are designed to try some terrorists, such as domestic terrorists, which is what their evidence was talking about. But the fact is, the terrorists being held in Guantanamo Bay need to be kept in Guantanamo Bay. And that is why I ask you to stand with the negative team. So throughout the course of this speech, I first of all clarified the goal of the negative team. Show how ultimately we need to uphold national security in all issues. And then I talked about the necessary balance in the current system. We do believe that it is necessary to try some terrorists in Article 3 courts, but it is also necessary to try some terrorists in military commissions. So at the end of the day, I ask you to stand with national security. I ask you to stand with the negative team. Thank you.